Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Vikings Spin. I'm your host, Jason, and we are going to preview the upcoming Vikings game here against the Ravens coming up on Sunday. The Vikings going to the game 4-2, tied for first place in the NFC North, battling the Ravens, who are 3-3, and in second place in their division. Some team news from last week. Of course, the infamous play where Anthony Barr hit Aaron Rodgers. I've said it the whole time. Most people with an objective view have agreed. Anthony Barr's hit was clean. He was not fined for his hit on Aaron Rodgers. So indeed, it holds up as a clean hit. Moving forward, there was a lot of back and forth, between Mike McCarthy and the media, and Anthony Barr and Mike Zimmer. Some Packer fans on there trolling Anthony Barr's Twitter account. I think they're just upset that their quarterback is out for the season. It wasn't a malicious hit. The Vikings are not a dirty team. I've watched the hit numerous times. I don't see the issue there, but nonetheless, moving on, some other team news. The Vikings quarterback situation. Sam Bradford is still seeing a specialist for the Genekine treatments to try to get his knee right. Mike Zimmer believes that he will still play this season. There have been some speculation as excuse me, if this was going to be a really more serious injury for Bradford. But Mike Zimmer is remaining optimistic. I'm trying to remain optimistic as well, hoping that Sam Bradford can get back for the Vikings. Also in quarterback news, of course, Teddy Bridgewater started practicing again this week. Pretty remarkable recovery for Teddy. We weren't sure if he would ever see the field again in the NFL, but his rehab is progressing well. The Vikings have 21 days, that has started already, to decide whether to activate him or place him on season-ending injured reserve. Mike Zimmer said they hadn't really done a lot of non-controlled environment stuff with Teddy yet. Pat Shurmur was also alluding to baby steps. So, we're going to have to see how Bridgewater progresses here over the next 2 weeks to see if a roster move will be made. My guess is it probably depends on Bradford's status, whether they would activate Teddy or not. But that's a conversation for we can probably have a whole separate podcast about the Vikings quarterback situation and what contract tolling involves, and for Teddy, and the status of Bradford and Bridgewater and Keenum, moving forward. But I mean, right now it's just a bunch of speculation, so I'm not going to get into it. What we are going to get into is Case Keenum is going to be the starting quarterback on Sunday again. Case, credit to him, he just shows up, does his job, and he's been the one getting the Vikings through this season and keeping them on track with a record. He's got a 3-2 record as a starter. The Vikings are 4-2 overall. So I'm glad that we have him. The Vikings players are confident in him, and I think he gives us a good chance to win on Sunday. So let's get to that on Sunday. The injury reports are out, and for the Vikings, of course, Sam Bradford will be out. Stephon Diggs will also be out. He's going to miss his second consecutive game with that groin injury. Nick Easton will also be out as well for a second consecutive game. Questionable on the report this week are Michael Floyd, Mackenzie Alexander, Riley Reif, and Tremaine Brock. Michael Floyd practiced the least amount this week. He did not practice the first 2 days of practice this week, but was limited in today's practice here. And the rest of them there, Mackenzie Alexander was limited all week. Riley Reif was not on the injury report at all until today. He was limited. And Tremaine Brock started off not on the report and then was limited today and on Thursday as well. So probably the one, Michael Floyd said he was hopeful that he'll play, but he's probably one least likely to play out of those four questionables because he didn't practice as much as the others. But we'll have to see. I'd say 50-50 on all these guys, really. But, maybe Riley Reef probably has the best chance to play because he was only limited to 1 day. But we'll see how that plays out. For the Ravens, they have a number of injuries, not counting the stuff that happened to them early in the year when they lost a bunch of guys who are on injured reserve. But they have out this week their wide receiver 2, Perryman. He's going to be out. The starting guard, Skira, is out. So that's 2 offensive starters there. You could probably say 3 because West, the running back, that's their short yardage guy. He's also going to be out. Their third tight end, Williams, is out, and a backup linebacker, Williams, and let's see, Matthews, wide receiver 4, doubtful. Questionable for them, their starting defensive tackles, Williams and Carl Davis are both questionable, as well as Jeremy Macklin and Mike Wallace at receiver. Though these guys have been practicing, so I'm thinking that they're going to play. Also listed on the report were offensive tackle Ronnie Stanley, cornerback Jimmy Smith, and cornerback Jalen Hill. So they are banged up at receiver. Two of the top 4 guys are out, and then the other 2 are a little hobbled. A little hobbled on the defensive line, with Davis and Williams, though I think they'll both play. But Flacco will definitely miss Perryman, and the Ravens offense will miss their short yardage back in West, for sure. And of course the right guard, Skira, that's a big one for them to have an injury and have to go and face the Vikings defensive line in Minnesota. So as far as the matchups go, I would think now in terms of the Vikings defense, Xavier Rhodes, I don't know if he'll shadow Mike Wallace or not. Let's say that Wallace and Macklin play. Are Wallace or Macklin really dominating receivers where you have to have him follow somebody? I don't know. I don't suspect that would be the case, but it could. We'll have to see. But between Rhodes and Waynes matching up against Wallace and Macklin, I like the Vikings' chances there. So on the front lines of the cornerback versus receiver matchups there. The running back is Alex Collins, a young back that started off with the Seahawks. He's having a pretty good year. The Ravens are running the ball fairly effectively, but they're not passing the ball well at all, and they are turning the ball over quite a bit on offense. So the Vikings will definitely have their chances here to get to Joe Flacco. Stanley, the offensive tackle, is a little banged up, though he'll probably play, but he's a little banged up. And he'll have to deal with Everson Griffin, Danielle Hunter, Brian Robinson. Not something you want to do when you're banged up, but that plays into our hands very well. And the thing with Joe Flacco is he's turning the ball over quite a bit. He's got his touchdown to interception ratio. He's got 4 touchdown passes and 8 interceptions. Okay, and now the Vikings, they have Case Keenum 5 touchdowns, 1 interception. Sam Bradford 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. So the Vikings have an 8-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, and the Ravens have a 4-to-8. Now defensively, the Ravens have a pretty good defense. They're able to take the ball away, as they did against the Raiders. Excuse me. And that was a couple weeks ago. And then the Ravens are now coming off a bad loss against the Chicago Bears. The Ravens, on defense, they have some solid players in Smith and Weddle, but what they've had problems with this year is play action. So if you can establish the run against the Ravens, they have safeties that'll bite. Eric Weddle has been prone to biting on some play actions, as well as Tony Jefferson. So these guys they've been hit or miss really on the defense. They're making plays, but they're also giving up plays. So I think if the Vikings can establish the run and take care of the football for the most part, win the turnover battle, they should be able to win this game with the home field advantage. The Ravens do boast a really good special teams. Justin Tucker is probably one of the best kickers in the league. They do well on kick returns and punt returns, punt coverages, but so do the Vikings. The Vikings are the best in the business on punt coverage. What this really is going to come down to, I think, is, the Vikings, I think with Jimmy Smith a little hobbled, they can probably do what they did last week and move Thielen all over the place. See if Smith will follow him. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. But the Vikings have enough weapons where I think that they can take advantage of some of the stuff that Baltimore does. Now, Baltimore runs a 3-4 defense, so this is similar to what Green Bay runs. So this is nothing that the Vikings haven't seen. The Bears run 3-4. The Steelers have run 3-4. So we've seen plenty of 3-4 this season. Mike Zimmer also has history against the Ravens when he was with the Bengals. So it's a team and scheme concepts that Zimmer is familiar with. I think the Vikings just have to not let up. The Vikings have had some intense matchups against the Bears and Packers and the Lions the last few weeks. They played their division. This is a game against an AFC opponent, but it's still a big one because the Vikings are at home, and you want to win your home games. You want to stack those wins. A lot of people have been looking ahead to say that the Vikings want to be 6-2 at the bye. I think that would be great. Just take it 1 week at a time. Obviously with Diggs out, it's not as easy on offense, but we got it done last week against the Packers defense, which I think is similar in some respects that, like the Ravens, they give up yards, but they also make opportunistic plays too and try to get you to turn the ball over. But the Vikings just have to win a turnover battle, be cognizant of that. McKinnon has been playing really well for the Vikings. He just got to hold on to the ball. But other than that, he's making plays. I expect to see more of the same with the McKinnon and Murray splitting carries, and just keeping the offense diverse. Hopefully Floyd can play. If he can't, Treadwell had probably his best game as a pro last week, so that's a step in the right direction for him. Of course, we still have the trusty veteran Jarius Wright that can come in and provide some depth. Thielen showed that he can pick up the slack in Diggs' absence, and Kyle Rudolph will for sure be a big part of the game plan. The Vikings they've been, what's gotten the Vikings to 4-2 is their depth. Depth at quarterback, depth at running back, depth on the offensive line. I thought Searles played well last week, filling in for Easton. And then this week we get Sendejo back. He missed the last game. Anthony Harris had to fill in, did a pretty decent job last week. Didn't make any big mistakes, but Sendejo's coming back, and that's going to help against a guy like Joe Flacco. Flacco is a guy that he's got a big-time arm, but sometimes he'll take risks, when he shouldn't. He's not the most mobile guy in the world, but it's not like he can't move at all either. I would say he's probably similar to what we saw with Jameis Winston earlier. He's a guy that can throw the ball deep and make big plays, but he'll also take some risks, and he might get himself in trouble that way. I think that's a good matchup for the Vikings. They have the secondary to take advantage of that stuff and the pass rush to get after it and force him into some mistakes. So excuse me, hopefully that's what we see in this game. And you know, like, it'd be nice to come out of this 5-2, and you know, hopefully alone in first place if the Saints could beat the Packers, the Brett Hundley led Packers, and I think that's a very real possibility this week. So you know, hopefully let's get the win. And I thank you guys so much for tuning in again here for another edition of Viking Spin, and I'll leave you guys with a little Goo Goo Dolls, only one. Thanks for joining.